What makes the achievement of emotional sobriety so difficult is the habits we have, the patterns we have in our behavior, the habitual ways that we've come to think about things. We have to really become aware of those things in order to challenge them, because the consciousness that has created a lot of the problems in our life cannot solve it, cannot change things. So what happens is the first step is waking up. You know what stood out today? Perfect romance, perfect security.
Yeah.
I mean, that perfectionism is such a major issue, right? Such an impediment to actualizing what's possible.
I've been thinking about just the word perfect, right? That it's in here.
Yeah.
And the hangups that come with that.
So many, man. It's such a curse. You know, the positive side of it, you know, we can strive, right, towards excellence. That's a great thing to have, but not to drive ourselves so blindly and absolutely towards it. You know, that's where it becomes problematic. Yeah. All right, man. Thank you. Thanks for reading tonight. Well, as I mentioned, Thom is going to be joining me in the room tonight. He's going to be taking the lead on step 6. You know, as you probably noticed, is that as we start to explore the steps, what we're doing is Herb is leading us off, and he did so 3 weeks ago, introducing step 6 and putting it in the context of what we've done so far with the other steps. And also, you know, talking about some of the essential elements of working step 6 and what it means in our recovery. Roger followed up last week, and he talked about self-esteem and applied the principles, Dr. Nathaniel Brandon's 7 principles of self-esteem, to looking at what impact, you know, that step is having on the development of an authentic, you know, or real self-esteem that's occurring in our life, which is very different than the pseudo self-esteem that came from our false self. And Roger, you just did a great job, as well as Herb. Thom is going to take the lead tonight, and then I will be continuing the discussion of step 6 next week. So Thom, good evening.
Good evening. Hi.
Hi.
Look, I prepared.
Oh, look. Wow.
Standing ovation.
Roger and I were talking just earlier today about what a wonderful job you did last month on step 5. And
the pressure's on now.
Organized, and it's like, my goodness, there's a whole nother side of you. When we first met,
you mean the guy who can get things.
We first met, we were presenting together at the Evolution conference, and we met the night before, and he says, I have my PowerPoint. I said, yeah, what is it? You picked up your hand. And he said,
that's it. You can, other than art, I used to say it doesn't malfunction, but now I have arthritis, so it kind of does, but you don't leave it, you know, you don't lose it anyway. It's there. Alan, and because of Alan, I felt pressure to learn PowerPoint, and I did PowerPoint. The first PowerPoint I did, I just did, if you remember, I put silly hats on pictures of you and me. It's like, that was it. That was the PowerPoint. And you know, and I think I put a final slide that just said, what else? What did you expect? You know, and it's like, but I'm learning as we go. So
you're growing.
Yeah, growing as we go. It's like, actually what I've done tonight is I've written something that I'm going to read. I just wrote it today. I just felt inspired this morning at my morning meditation I was thinking about doing this, and I thought, well, I don't work off of notes very well, but I can read something. And so, and ultimately what I want to do is I want to create a visual for us tonight about step 6, because I'm not everybody is very visual. I am very visual. And it helps me to have things that I see in my mind that I can't unsee. First things first, to make the connection, I'll just go ahead and not be subtle about this. To make the connection between step 6 and self-esteem, to me, it's all about self-honesty. That's what freedom is. That's what this step is about. It is about, when we say we're ready, it means we're ready to become who we are, period. Just without editing. I'm going to put this cat down. No, I'm not. She doesn't want to go down. Okay, so I want to read. First of all, I want to read you a little quotation from one of my favorite authors, Pema Chodron, from a book she has called "When Things Fall Apart." It's like most of us know the feeling of when things fall apart. I recommend this book. This I love all of her books, but two of my favorites is there's this one, which I'm rereading now, and then another one called "Welcoming the Unwelcome," which I think is what I think of is her emotional sobriety book. But here's a little quotation, a little bit taken out of context, but it works. It works for what we're using it for. It says, ultimately, it comes down to the question of just how willing we are to lighten up and loosen our grip. And then the question, how honest do we want to be with ourselves? And it's like just to ask that question and be ready to answer honestly. And the answer may be different on different days, of course. And the other thing I just want to say in broad, just kind of hitting the major points is we've talked about this, but one of the things I always want to say about step 6 is something we start when we arrive there for the first time. And then my opinion is if we're doing a good job with it, then that becomes a part of our daily practice forever, for as long as we're in practice, because when we let God remove these character defects, to me, that's also just the same as letting go of something. It's like what I do, here's how we let go of things. I mean, if I say I'm attached to this mug, I'm going to let it go. I put it down and I let it go. And then sure enough, I look around and I still have it there. So I put it down and I, let it go. And then it comes up over here. It's like, how many times am I going to let something go? I'm going to let it go as often as I need to until it's no longer coming back up. But the process is the letting go, not the fact that it has to be gone forever. That's the perfectionist dream, is that we're gonna go through any of these steps and it's going to be time to dust our hands off. That's not going to happen. So I'll give you a little intro to the imagery I want to create today. I want everybody to close your eyes, or don't close your eyes, but I want you to go into a deep trance. I'll just wait for a moment. Okay, probably everybody's in a deep trance now. And what I want you to do is I want you just to imagine that. Just think about your character defects. Now, before I say any more about that, I'll say I tend to use the term characteristic rather than character defects, because I'm a big believer that we all have these various characteristics, and there's an upside and a downside to all of them. My ability, my relaxed nature, the downside of that can be laziness, and avoidance. The upside is I'm the perfect guy to take on vacation with you, because as opposed to somebody who's got a little bit more of a compulsive nature. So I think they are kind of characteristics, but I'm going to use Bill's terminology tonight with character defects. And I want you to think back on some of the things that you have discovered in your work and your program. Some of the things you can consider just character defects. Some of the things that everything from massive horrible flaws that you think you have to just all the smaller glitches. And I want you to imagine just for a moment that all of these things, each one of these things, is a piece of armor. And that's what our visual tonight is going to be about. It's like all the things that we are willing for God to remove is our armor, the stuff that we have developed because we needed to develop. It wouldn't be there if it didn't serve a purpose. But once we, the whole idea here is I come out of battle in my suit of armor, and want to go have a cup of coffee with somebody. It's inconvenient. I want to go to the movies, and that armor is just clanking around. So that's where we're going to go with this. I'm just going to read this to you, and I want you just to see if you can get this visual with me. The exact nature of these so-called defects of character, I say AKA characteristics, the exact nature is self-care and self-defense. They are what we learned was necessary to cope with our environment through our early days. To the degree that these characteristics now prove counterproductive to our chosen path of psychological and spiritual growth, think of these as armor. However much armor we are wearing is exactly the amount of armor that we have needed. I want to read that to you again, because this is a really important one. And my wife was reading this before, and she said, be sure and emphasize this. This is about compassion. However much armor we are wearing is exactly the amount of armor that we have needed. In parentheses, I have, we always make sense even when we think we don't. We come by our armor honestly. Because we have gathered these coping mechanisms, that is this armor, unconsciously, we are not inclined to perceive ourselves as separate from our armor. Clanking around in our heavy metal suits is our normal. In fact, at the beginning of our recovery journeys, we are identified with our armor. We are our armor. When I think about that, I think about just the identity issues I had alone when I quit drinking. I mean, it was like, I literally didn't feel like I had a clue about who I was or what mattered in my life, because I was so identified with alcohol. The armor was necessary at one or various points along the way, but as adults in pursuit of improving our mental, physical, and spiritual well-being, wearing this heavy armor is cumbersome, to say the least. It certainly interferes with the development of healthy relationships. I mean, think about it. With my armor on, you can't even see me. I'm just the guy inside the armor. To do this, imagine this. Imagine me standing in front of you. I'm standing in front of you in all my armor, and clanking around there, and I just stand there, and then I just hold my arms out. I stretch my armored arms out and say, "Come here, give me a hug." Imagine that hug with that armor. It's not exactly the picture of intimacy. Okay, enter step 6. We'll review. We're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. Bill Wilson writes that this is the step that separates the men from the boys. A little misogyny here. The men from the boys. For my purposes this evening, step 6 is the beginning of separating the person from the armor. How vulnerable am I likely to feel after being so identified with this suit of armor when I begin to take it off piece by piece, when I begin to let it go or ask God to remove it? I made the point to myself thinking about that. Hell, I get uncomfortable when it gets to, I love my sport jacket so much. When it gets to be summer and it's too hot to wear a jacket, I have trouble taking that off sometimes. Can imagine. So, very last thing I want to say, this brings to one of the therapeutic one-liners, these things that we call nutshells. And this is a favorite of mine, and it fits here with this the armor imagery. And it says this simply: beneath who you are not, you will discover who you are. I'll just do that one more time. Beneath who you are not, you will discover who you are. So to me, the self-honesty is about letting go of our armor, being willing to put it down. But in the case of step 6 is actually the humility of becoming ready for these character defects, for this armor to be removed. Not just about me, not me doing it. It's whatever my relation to that higher power is. I'm ready for this. I'm ready to enter this phase of my life that is going to be characterized by radical, and sometimes very frightening self-honesty. That's what I got.
Fantastic, man. Thank you. All right, Thom, let me bring us, there we go. We're all getting in the room. Where's Roger at? There he is. And is Herb with us tonight? There he is.
Yay.
Gentlemen. Herb, you're muted, so make sure you unmute yourself before you start. Okay, Raj, you want to start off, and then Herb, and then I'll follow up?
It's hard for me to speak with, especially the armor on my face. It constricts my jaw. Well, as you guys know, and Alan in particular knows, when I came out of here in the early 70s to do my personal therapy on myself with Nathaniel Brandon, I met a guy through him who had studied with Wilhelm Reich. And Reich in the 1920s and 30s is the man who put the body into psychotherapy. And he wrote a lot about what he called muscular armor. Mm-hmm. That this idea of how we protect our vulnerabilities, how we take care of ourselves as best we can as kids, isn't just something we do in our mind, that it's very much something we do in our body. Mm-hmm. And he noticed as a young psychoanalyst that having people lay on the couch and free associate and do dream analysis had value, but it wasn't helping them change nearly as much as he was interested in helping them change. So he noticed people would talk about very traumatic experiences they had had as children, as adults, with no feeling. And he was perplexed by that. He also noticed certain patterns of tension in the facial muscles of his patients, and in their necks and shoulders, and in their breathing, and in the rest of their body. And he began to physically work with those areas of their body that were so tense, were so armored. And much to his surprise and the surprise of his patients, strong outpourings of emotion began to occur for these patients. They would begin to cry when they hadn't cried for decades. They would become angry, even enraged, become fearful, even terrified, depending on what he was asking them to do with their breathing and what he was doing with the musculature. So I don't want to go more into detail, but I was so fascinated by that. And I thought my body had so little to do with the emotions that I experienced and didn't experience, that I ended up studying with the guy Nathaniel introduced me to, Chuck Kelly. And for about 15 years, that's the kind of work that I did with people, because it's still, when we talk about emotions, we talk about the feelings we have, but we also talk about the expressive movements our emotions want to make. When we're sad, we want to what? We want to cry. When we find something really funny, what do we want to do? We want to laugh. When we're scared, we want to either freeze or run away, right? When we're angry, what do we want to do? We want to hit or bite or kick or hurt somebody else, right? And obviously we learn and need to learn in the course of our development how to regulate and contain all of those feelings. But I just love that you use the metaphor of armor tonight, Thom, because it's more than a metaphor. It's very much something that we are all subconsciously, almost always, because we've been doing it since we were little folk, okay? It's something
Well,
that we
and
all.
I want to say also, Roger, that the stuff that just come out in the last 20, 25 years about trauma and
Yeah.
trauma memories and all this has reinforced that so much. And it's like, you know, and it's like, and I'm not specialized in what you're talking about at all. I'm fascinated with it, but it's like, you know, you know, we watch our clients physically as much as we listen to their words.
Yeah.
Because it'll,
Yeah.
you know, it'll tell you. So anyway, thanks.
No, I appreciate that, because that's right. And the major form now that is the most popular of body-oriented work is called somatic experiencing, at least major from my perspective. But emotions, as I was saying, they want us to move. And if we're going to stop the experience and expression of those emotions, we need to tighten muscles throughout our body to what? To prevent those movements, to prevent ourselves from crying, prevent ourselves from showing excitement, and so on. Now, to tie this into step 6, a lot of our characteristics, character defects, coping mechanisms are built in. They are part of our muscular armoring, as you're saying. They are part of our self-protectiveness. And as we open up, initially just by beginning to acknowledge the holding, acknowledge the defects, right? Acknowledge the issues. As we do that, we also begin to change physically. And people will comment on that. As we start to open up emotionally, we also begin to open up physically. And through acknowledging our imperfections, it's what Carl Rogers said. Who I am, what I am is good enough if I would only be it openly, right? If I would only learn to be it more openly. So the first step for me is just starting with awareness and starting with acknowledgement and acceptance. That's what Pema Chodron is all about in those quotes. Be with what is, not with what I'd like to have happening. Be with what is. So I won't go further than that, but obviously I appreciate the heck out of you starting with the knowledge, imagery for all of us, that we are all more or less encased in this subconscious armor that we can shed ourselves of with time and perseverance, you know. So thanks, Thom. Thanks very much, man.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks, Roger. Thanks, Thom, very much. And yeah, the image of armor, I mean, just nails it. It makes it so visceral, not just a vision, but it makes it really visceral, especially if you've done, I mean, all the people who are attending this have done enough consciousness work to really connect to that. And thank you for starting off with honesty. And I think you said rigorous honesty, because I wrote it down. And that's the word that Bill uses in chapter 5, entitled How It Works. If you want to awaken, how it works is, and he spends 2/3 of the page in various comments about rigorous honesty as an introduction to step 4, which I see as the unpacking of the the underlying nature of the origin of and the reason for these defense mechanisms, default survival mechanisms of anger and fear and dishonesty, going right back to what I think it was you, Thom, or Roger talked about, fight, flight, and freeze, these instincts in us. Bill says it, instincts gone awry. And this is really what he's meaning. I mean, he doesn't have the vocabulary of a sophisticated psychology in 1939, but he had an intuition into human nature. And that was the first time, 48 years old, 4 years sober, doing that work, that I began to have a crack in the armor. And it was looking at my anger and the fear on the other side of it. The anger I had a hard time getting connected to. The fear I had never seen, but the yin and the yang of that began to open me up, part the armor a little bit, so there was enough light for me to say, wow, look at that. And I won't go on with that, but that was the first part. Then when I came to step 6, it was pretty easy to identify the default positions that I'd had, ego defense mechanisms, I called them in those days. But therapy was helping to unpack them. But it was when I was on a retreat and somebody introduced me to, the whole retreat was on the Enneagram, which is a personality study. I won't go into that, but I was able to see that, oh, I'm not deficient. You're not better than me. You're not worse than me. You're just different. I'm just different. It's the way I'm structured. I have a primary defense mechanism of dishonesty. Mm-hmm. I hide. They call that dishonesty or lying or all the rest of that, camouflage. Camouflage goes along with the armor concept. And one of the people in the group named it. Of course, anger is pretty easy. Resentment and fear and anxiety is pretty easy. But they named the dishonesty as the shame reaction. I had never connected shame as an emotion. Of course, I'm not very familiar with emotions anyway. My 2 daughters tell me I need to protect my one emotion, whatever that is. So it's about trying to feel safe. And so it's not just understanding the nature of it, which I did there and in therapy and in reading, etc. And it's not in our meditation practices and understanding that we need help here. It was when I learned from doing this step with this man who took me through the step the first time that it was about behavior. And that's a story that I'll share when we get to step 7, but it was about realizing that, okay, I can accept I'm powerless over it. Look at every effort I've ever made has not been very effective. Yeah, okay, I'm powerless. And I've learned in the process of praying in the resentment inventory and the fear inventory and the sex inventory to be guided and to have power because I could see that powerlessness there. But as a result of step 6 and 7, I saw that, oh, I'm powerless over the instinct, over the inclination. This is a distinction that was experiential for me. I'm powerless over the inclination, but I'm fully responsible for how it manifests in my behavior. So I pray because I'm powerless, but I hold myself accountable to more than one person, probably specifically for the removal of and or the change in the behavior. And I think you're familiar with Dr. Siegel's work in terms of the rewiring of the brain. And he says information is good, but it won't change you. Feelings are good, but it won't change you. I mean, you talked about the gestalt, the feelings and the connecting to the trauma. He said, what will change your brain is behavior, contrary action. Act contrary to the way you think, act contrary to the way you feel. And in fact, you will change the way you think and you will change the way you feel. And that's the power, I think, of step 6 and 7, the identification and the action to go with it. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thanks. Yes.
Thank you, Herb. Wow. Wow.
Well, let me go ahead and share a few thoughts that came to mind when you shared, Thom. First of all, a big thank you for taking us, for first of all hypnotizing us. Can I come out of the trance now? I'm just waiting.
Oh yeah, sure, go ahead.
Never took us out. You put us in, left us there, man.
It's like that the Mike Judge movie. What's it called? Office Space. That's where the guy gets caught in the trance and he doesn't give a shit about his job. That's
right. That was a funny one. No, it was a great, and I look, you did your PowerPoint again with the cup. Right?
Yeah.
You still have that PowerPoint. I can still see it's operating. It's pretty good, even with the arthritis. But look, that image really brought something to me that I think I want to underscore right now. And see, when we're getting ready to have all our character defects removed, what we're doing is we're really introducing to ourselves that there's going to be a process involved here. Mm-hmm. And we can't emphasize this enough, that we're engaging in a process. And like you said, the biggest setup would be to think, well, now that I've set this down, now that I'm not being dishonest right now, then I'm not ever going to be dishonest again.
Right.
Or now if I've, right, that if I,
yeah, it just makes me laugh. Yeah.
I've stopped erasing myself in this one relationship, I'm going to stop erasing myself. Or I've lessened my emotional dependence on this one person. I'm not going to be emotionally dependent anymore. See, I think we've got to guard against this absolute thinking that's driven by that perfectionism, right? That, my God, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it perfectly. So now I'm going to get rid of this and it's gone forever. Mm-hmm. Nothing is gone forever.
Well, even that is not to use a different word than perfectly, is even completely. It's like completely. It's not we don't complete. We don't complete this. I mean,
away. No, it's not. Yeah. Look, that's why we say, look, my alcoholic self, my addict self, you call him your tequila boy. Mm-hmm, he's with me the rest of my life. That's not going anywhere. Now, I'm not being managed by that part of me anymore. Thank God that there's other parts of me, and with the help of a lot of people and God or whoever or you else you want to think about it, is that part's no longer running the show. Right. That part's going to be with me, and we know that when we see people go out and relapse, it can take over a person's life. Herb, you and I have seen it. People with decades of recovery go out, and they have lost themselves to the alcoholic self again. It can happen to any one of us. So none of these things are gone forever. Dishonesty can always be an option if that's been a part of my life. Hiding can always be an option. Shame can always be a part of me. I mean, all of the things, self-centeredness, all self-serving, my narcissism, whatever you want to call, whatever you want to throw into that hopper of character defects. The point here is that they are not going to be as dominant in your life. As you work with these things, they recede in the background. I like how Herb uses this image of a stage at times, like who's in the center stage? Mm-hmm. Well, I've got all these characters with me, but who's out there, taking the lead in the play, is what I need to pay attention to. I can bring any one of these clowns out at any given time. They're all out there. They would love to audition to take the lead role again, some of them. But see, as we start to do this process, right, as we start to do the work, we're not driven by the worst in us. We're now led by the best in us. And I'll say that again, that before we become conscious, it's very easily to be driven by the worst in us. Driven by the part of us that's fearful, the part of us that doesn't think that if we don't wrestle from life satisfaction, we're never going to have it, right? This part of us that wants to control everything, the control freak, right? And when you talk about letting go and I'm going to emphasize, I'll talk about this more, when we let go, we're going to go out of control. And this is a very important part.
Well, we're letting go of the illusion of control.
Yes.
It's like it's not. Yeah, it's like that's why I like to use the term in charge. Like we're talking about with Herb's imagery. It's like we need the person, because otherwise it's just like you're a bus full of people that just keep beating each other up and carjacking the damn bus to go different places. And instead we get to the place where we can be this person in charge that basically. All those guys are there and they're all screaming and some days are better than others, but I'm not giving up the wheel. I'm driving. Yeah. It's like, so, all you guys can tell me what you think. It's fine. Thank you for sharing, but it's like, I'm driving.
So when we are getting ready to have these defects of character removed, it means that we are now engaging in a lifelong pursuit.
Yes.
Right. Of really raising our consciousness and continuing to stoke the flames of our awareness to become aware of these things and face them as they come up. And more will. One of Bill's greatest lines to me in the big book is more will be revealed. More will be
which is why there's not a completion, because if I'm totally self-honest today, I can't know what I don't know. So I'm not being honest with myself about what I haven't discovered, what I haven't become aware of.
And how much more honest are you today? I mean, look, I can tell you, for me, the degree of honesty that I have today, it's so different than 50 years ago when I started this journey. Herb, your honesty today is, I mean, look, you couldn't even see that you were an alcoholic when you walked into the groups at San Pedro. I mean, it first started with a question: what's your relationship like with alcohol? And you went, oh my God, wait a minute here. Now I started getting honest. As you called it, you started thawing out. I mean, that's what it is. It's thawing out. It's really starting to take off some of the armoring. That's the thawing out.
It's the awakening. It's that awakening, and that's a process, not an event, as you all were talking about.
That's I want to emphasize that tonight. We're really engaging in a process here, and that's what all these steps are doing. They're starting a whole, process that's starting to gain momentum in our life, and more momentum. As we say, in the beginning, you work the steps, but eventually the steps work you.
Yeah.
That momentum becomes so strong that, because what it connects you to is that growth force that we talked about. And once that growth force comes back in and really becomes the driving force in your life, stand by.
As long as you gently lean into it to stay awake, because we can fall back asleep again.
Oh, so easy.
Harry Tebow said, Bill got it right. The first 9 steps are for the deflation of the ego at depth, but the ego has an uncanny way of regenerating itself.
I hear a lot of people criticize the 12 steps, that they're old-fashioned. I can understand that criticism. They were written back in 1935. Some people that are agnostic have difficulty with the word God used in the steps. For me, I look at the process that's involved. The forces that the 12 steps generate are so powerful that I think they're ageless. There's this interesting phenomena that happens when you work the steps. They create a charge and then a discharge. The first step, we're powerless. Our life has become unmanageable. It creates this charge. We're in big trouble and we don't know what to do. And then step 2 comes along and it says we have hope. That charge, that existential crisis that we have is resolved. What's happening here is parallel to life. We charge ourselves when we breathe in. When we exhale, we discharge. That's the rhythm of life. And the way I love to think about the 12 steps, it's helping us get connected to the rhythm of life so we can learn how to show up in a good way.